Before Whole Foods was an app on your phone, before Prime discounts and palm scanners, before 5 paper bags showed up on your porch holding 5 lonely items, there was this place, one store, Austin, Texas, 1980. A neighborhood grocery built around farmers, food, and community. When a flood wiped it out less than a year after opening, customers showed up with mops and buckets to rebuild it. Not investors, not consultants, the community. That store was Whole Foods. And in this episode, we tell the story of how a mission-driven company that once nourished people and planet became a case study in what happens when values meet misaligned capital. This isn't a story about villains, though. It's a story about pressure, about growth, about what happens when quarterly returns quietly replace community as a decision maker in the room. On this episode, we're telling the full story of the Amazon Whole Foods acquisition, what led up to it, why it happened so fast, and what it teaches founders who deeply care about what happens after they exit. Because exits are never neutral. Someone's values always shape what comes next. I'm Hannah, and this is Ethical Exits.
Hello, and welcome everyone to another episode of Ethical Exits. This is a special one. This is one that we are doing by demand, by popular demand from our audience. This is what we refer to as a narrative episode. So we're actually going to be storytelling. I'm going to tell Caitlin a story about a particular exit, about a company that sold their company to another company, and what happened after post sale. And I also want to acknowledge that this is Caitlin's final episode of Ethical Exit, which is a sad one. we we mentioned on the last episode with Chris Fredericks that Caitlin has decided she wants to move on and do other things, which we're very supportive of, and we're very grateful for everything she's contributed here. But she could not help herself; she had to come back for at least one more episode of Ethical Exits.
I couldn't get enough, but it's great to be back, Hannah. Who knows? Maybe I'll come on a later date too, but I'm excited
Yeah,
to get
these ones are
this one.
yeah, these ones are fun. And Caitlin, you were this was really your ideas for the podcast, so this is all kudos to you. This is your brainchild. I think it's really worked out well. So grateful for you, and I know we've been able to produce so many good episodes, and I think this is going to be one of a very popular one. I know the other one we did a narrative style episode on Toys R Us,
Yep.
really well received, and is one of our most popular episodes that is downloaded and streamed. So I think this is going to be another good one, and we'll release it right before Christmas. So a little bit of a Christmas present for our viewers.
Great. I know. I can't wait to hear this story in full. I know a little bit about it, but I'm looking forward to diving in head first and you telling me everything I need to know about
Yes.
this went and all
Yes.
to be.
Yeah. So let's get into it. So the way that this I kind of resonated with this story that I'm about to tell you is I ordered groceries online recently. Have you ever done that before?
I have.
Okay. Like through a flip card or something like that.
Yeah, like something like that, like some delivery service.
Yeah, exactly. So the other day we're pressed for time and we ordered groceries online. And Caitlin, I can't describe to you what was received and what was on my doorstep was absolutely ridiculous. I think we ordered like less than 10 items, and there were 6 bags on my front porch. 6 bags, taped, rolled over, foil lined, full size paper bags. Each had one one item in it, right? One yogurt, one avocado, an apple. I'm not joking you. Like an orange put
I
in its own bag by itself. I had never seen anything like this before. It had absolutely had zero logic, and it was
believe.
so bizarre and beyond anything that I'd seen. I couldn't help but wonder, like, what is going on in the back stock? How are they pulling items? Is there is no way a human is involved in this process where they're looking at the order list and they're grabbing items, picking items, bringing them back to the room where they pack up all orders and putting
Mhm.
just one item in each bag. That does not
Yeah,
map to any logical operational system.
waste of resources.
Complete waste of resources. It had zero operational logic. So it felt like something that would had been replaced by robots or by algorithms, right? I mean, certainly nobody who would like that I could associate with on a human level. As I stood in my kitchen and unloaded all these bags, right, bag after bag after bag with a single item, and you know what the worst part was?
What's that?
Is that we ordered it from Whole Foods.
No.
Yes,
No.
right, like
So, so the grocery store that's supposed to be about like wellness and like quote like conscious capitalism and like local slow growth.
exactly, exactly. So the brand that's built it's banking off its green ethos. This is what they've devolved into, right?
Mhm.
So it got me thinking, how the hell did we get there?
Mm.
And we were not alone in our curiosity. So if you remember, Caitlin, you launched a poll a couple months ago because we're gonna plan one of these new narrative episodes,
Yep.
and you launched a poll, and you had some ideas. I had some ideas on stories we could tell. I guess we're thinking about these big, bolder acquisitions and trying to figure out what happened to them. Very similar to what we the story that we told about Toys R Us, and there was a very clear winner, and it was 58% of the vote. Everybody wanted to know, or a good portion of our listeners, our audience, wanted to know what happened to Whole Foods after Amazon bought it. How do we get to where we are with Whole Foods? What was that story? King Arthur's Baking was a close second at 30% of the vote,
Hmm.
and we got a lot of inputs from our friends. Right, there's a lot of comments on these posts. One of our fellow B Corp founders, Nathan Struck, he commented, "I'm rooting for Whole Foods because the public story is wish they could have been a B Corp, and the rumor just isn't that simple." Right, that's not the whole story. That could have prevented what happened or what is happening continue to happening to Whole Foods. Or Meg Crumbine, who's a marketing and sales coach for B2B female solopreneurs. She said, "I remember when Whole Foods was a single store in Austin, where I would travel frequently, and I'd never seen anything like it. Even sat next to the owner's dear old mom on a plane once, right? Real local, real, like, in the community."
Yeah.
And she said when they expanded and came to New York City, a block from her or from her apartment, she was over the moon. But now she doesn't shop there because it just feels gross, right?
Hmm.
Feels overly Bezos.
Yep.
And it's funny because I found a picture of the original Whole Foods. I'll have to post it on one of our shares because I showed it to Jessie this morning. She said it didn't even look like a store from this country, right? It looked like a bodega you'd see in Mexico, or even maybe in Thailand, right?
Hmm.
Um, but the store was founded in Austin in 1980, so that's 45 years ago, right?
Wow.
It's been around for a long time, a lot longer than a lot of us have exposure to. And it was founded by a couple of co-founders. The ones that are talked about most often are John Mackey and Renee Lawson Hardy.
Okay.
And it started out small, right? Mom and pop shop,
Mm.
and with a mission, and you said it very similarly, is to nourish the people on the planet, right? That was their mission, and it quickly grew to 19 employees.
Okay.
Then, less than a year in, there was a big flood. There's a huge flood.
No.
Yeah, there's a huge flood in Austin. Catastrophic storm hit Austin, destroyed the entire store. Right, they
Hmm.
hadn't even been open for a full year. Whole Foods lost everything. It could have been the end of their story. But here's the part that's really interesting, because they were locally grown, really authentic, organic, mission driven company. Can
Hmm.
you imagine who showed up with buckets and brooms and mops and towels?
They're customers in the community, I would imagine.
Yes. So
Yeah.
customers, neighbors, employees, everyone showed up, and they rebuilt the entire store in less than 1 month.
Wow.
Right?
Wow. The power of community, especially when you treat them right. Right?
Yes, yes, and like a unique like cornerstone in the community. They weren't going to let this go. They were so excited to have this store there, right?
Yeah.
So it wasn't just a business; it was absolutely a community asset. And this is written about in the Austin Chronicle. If you look at their historical archives from Austin and from 1981, you can find more information about this. And you can also find a picture of the original Whole Foods, which I will post because it's pretty cool. But this era definitely defined Whole Foods as an early champion of
Hmm.
local farmers and regional producers. It was the type of store, Caitlin, where if you had a product, right, like maybe you made, I don't know, little candies, or you made lotion or something, or maybe you made candles, or I don't know, maybe you made homemade yogurt. I don't know. This is that type of store where you could walk in there, right, just as you, with the creative samples in your story, and that story mattered. So Whole Foods was, their buyers at the store were known for shepherding emerging brands onto the shelves and educating customers about why those products mattered based on their story, not just what the products were.
So they were like at the forefront of supporting small businesses. Like they were hyper local, sound like they were slightly chaotic, very not corporate, but that was their
No,
pull. That was the attraction, right? It had soul to it.
totally had soul to it. It felt like it was an owned commodity, almost like a cooperative. Like, have you ever been to a grocery cooperative, right? Where I
Yeah,
feel like,
the kind of hippie grocery store vibe.
yeah, totally hippie grocery store.
Mhm.
I was reading. I went into the Reddit. And I'm not a Reddit person because I'm older. Like I'm an old person, so Reddit is like the new space for me. But I was looking at some of the comments, and there was a woman who said she had her one of her first jobs at a grocery store like this, and actually a grocery store that Whole Foods ended up acquiring, which I'll talk a little bit later about. But she was like ridiculed by a customer for not immediately recognizing kale from other from other lettuce product, right? Which is like so true. I mean, if you put yourself back there, like I can kind of smell what Whole Foods smelled like. It's like that grocery store that has that bulk food smell.
Mhm. Yep.
If you know what I mean. Like it doesn't smell clean corporate. It smells like organic. Like it smells like the people who work there. It smells like the food that's there. It smells like the real fresh ingredient, right?
Mhm.
Stuff that's lightly bagged, or a large bulk section, and they did have a large bulk section that people really loved because it kept the cost down.
Mhm.
Um, so they grew to 12 stores. So they operated in Texas, California, North Carolina, and Louisiana. And as we've seen before, growth requires cash,
Mhm.
right?
Yep.
Cash and pressure. We've seen this time and time again with companies that scale. It's just a necessity of how it works, especially when you're in a product-based business.
Mhm.
So they went to market and offered an IPO as a solution to their cash constraints.
Oh wow.
I
Okay.
know, huge decision, right? A huge decision for a relatively small company. So in 1992, Whole Foods went public. They're publicly traded on the stock market.
No way. I didn't know
Um,
that.
yeah, so of course, it helped to solve some of their immediate problems, but it also opened the door to a whole new set of maybe some issues or some risks. So
Mhm.
that move brought in capital that they needed, but it also brought in outside investors. And when you're public, Caitlin, you don't have control over who's giving you money,
Mhm.
right?
Yep. And
Or what they're.
I would think back in 1992, there's no internet like there is today.
Mhm.
There's not a lot of other stories that you can relate to say or just look at and say like, am I doing this right? Right? And you want to just
Yeah,
trust
sure.
that people have the best intentions in mind. But at the end of the day, who's ever investing, you know, their suggestions and their choices matter more than you probably think.
100% totally
Yeah.
matters, right? So the kind of people that invested in Whole Foods were the kind that wanted a quarterly return.
Mhm.
Right? Or maybe it was part of the profile that their investment banker recommended, or their wealth advisor recommended. But I don't know anything about Whole Foods other than that. They don't have a community tie to Whole Foods, right? So that changes the dynamic pretty significantly. And that
Mhm.
pressure started to change the culture. So quarterly expectations became the new invisible boss. So you remember that story I told you? Like you could be making yogurt in your backyard, and you could come in with your cute label, and you could talk about like how this you made this yogurt because maybe you could had some food sensitivity or whatever, right? And the local buyer could actually put your product on the shelf.
Yep.
Those kind of things were starting to move away. They still held on to that some, but not as organically as they could when they were a smaller company. And as Whole Foods expanded, they started to also buy market share. So they started to acquire competitors like Wild Oats in 2007. And the pressure only doesn't stop. It just continues to grow, right? It only gets more intense. This is kind of like a trap with entrepreneurship or running your business. It's like, which I've discovered most recently, it's like you're always kind of chasing capital, right? You're always in some sort of period of raise, and the more money you have, the more complicated your cap table gets, the more pressure is on your business, right? To continually chase returns. So how do they respond to this pressure? Well, they leverage the capital that they got from the IPO, from going public,
Mhm.
and they went on a buying spree. They wanted to buy up. The fastest way that they could achieve that growth, rather than organic sales at their own stores, was to effectively buy market share and to go into new geographies. Right?
And was this after the acquisition in 2007?
No, so we're still pre acquisition.
Okay.
We've gone IPO, we have extra capital, and we're trying to chase returns, trying to figure out how to get these returns that the investors now demand. There's a lot more pressure on their P&L, right?
Okay. Yep. Mhm.
There's a lot higher expectations for them to continually turn a profit. So Whole Foods expanded from 12 stores at the time of the 1992 IPO
Mhm.
to approximately 460 stores,
Wow.
right?
Wow.
By leveraging the capital raised from the IPO to fund a strategy of aggressive mergers and acquisitions of other natural food chains that were supplemented by organic store growth and a rising customer interest in healthy eating. So all these factors were kind of like were mixing, right? There was a lot more interest in organic produce or in healthy eating. There were all these regional chains that were popping up that were starting to become more and more popular. So Whole Foods had the capital and the cash to acquire them or to merge with them. So
Mhm.
these acquisitions absolutely allowed Whole Foods to enter new geographic markets and to consolidate the natural food industry and to control more of that market share. And these companies included like Wellspring Grocery in North Carolina, Bread and Circus in Massachusetts and Rhode Island. I don't know, like if you are familiar with that brand before.
I am. Yeah.
Um, yeah, it was really popular. People really loved that one. Mrs. Gooch, natural food markets in the LA area, fresh field markets on the East Coast and in the Midwest, which was the second largest natural food chain at the time.
Wow.
Um, and then other regional chains like Bread of Life, Merchant of Vino, Nature's Heartland, they were, going out and buying all these companies, right? And before, as I said before, with the IPO, they really struggled with cash flow issues. But going public enabled them to raise north of 20 million. So they were able to fund these significant acquisitions. Um, they still benefited their model. They still had good market alignment. As I said, that their growth continued as eating healthy and interest in natural organic products became more increasingly mainstream. The company's focus on high quality organic and natural products resonated strongly with a growing base of socially conscious and affluent customers, driving both store expansion and sales, right? And they still kind of kept that unique operating model where they adopted a non-traditional decentralized management model, and the stores and the regional teams still had fairly significant decision-making power, allowing them to tailor product assortments and store atmosphere to local communities. So what you might see in one of their acquired stores, maybe a local product, you wouldn't see in Texas, for instance, but you could get it in Boston, right?
Mhm.
So they were still kind of fostering that innovation and creativity across different regions and learning from each other, but definitely not was all rosy, right? This was absolutely the quiet turning point, because with every acquisition, Whole Foods was evolving from this community rooted grocer where everyone came out with their mops and buckets and towels to help clean up from the flood, into a national chain that had intense Wall Street expectations,
Mm. Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Their main focus was making money, I bet.
Of course, or they had to be focused on that, right? Despite whatever interest they might have had based on their mission and why they originally started the store. But
Mhm.
that scale gave them the reach, but it also made them vulnerable, right?
Mm. Yep. We've seen that before.
You've totally seen that before a million times, right? And we have I wanted to give one more quote from someone that engaged with our post, Jeff Schwaber from Coach. He's a coach and fractional CFO, and he said, He said you should also dig in on how they ruined Bread and Circus and lots of other independent, smaller, independent, much more affordable shops long before they were bought by Amazon, right? And that is true. So when you look at, based on your recommendation there, Jeff, I took a little bit deeper dive into Bread and Circus and what happened to them post acquisition. So Bread and Circus actually started a few years before Whole Foods, Caitlin, in 1975, and they had a small store in Brookline, Massachusetts. And the name is funny, Bread and Circus, right?
Mhm.
And they I guess they sold a combination of natural foods and wooden toys. So this was like a hippie like mecca. I can imagine, right?
Makes sense for Brookline. Yeah.
Yeah. Which and that was the inspiration behind the name, and they became the largest natural food retailer in the Northeast. So they were a big deal. People really loved them. They had a loyal and fervent clientele. Um, I told you that story from that Reddit post where that was the woman was working at Bread and Circus where she was ridiculed. She was like got a job as a bagger. You know, she's probably some like 17-year-old kid, and her customer like shaming them for not recognizing Kale. Right? I mean, these stores had an ethos, certainly a culture to them,
Hmm.
and it was a significant get by Whole Foods, as you can imagine. Right? They had
And I would expect too at that time, because I remember growing up in the 90s and early 2000s and having those little mom and pop organic
yeah,
grocery stores. These larger chains didn't sell or didn't really market stuff like kale. Didn't really care about like all of these kind of quote unquote like niche foods that, would help with longevity and wellness and health. So,
right.
yeah.
Yeah, or like I have this I'll show you this. My mom brought this back for me. But I remember going to like the organic grocer where I grew up in Boise, and there'd always be like weird little like products like this. Like this is chewing gum,
Uh-huh.
but it's from the Mayan rainforest and the flavor is coffee.
I love that.
Right? So I always like really loved to go to that store because there was always like really unique products that you wouldn't see anywhere else. Right?
Exactly. And it always had, like you said earlier, a very distinct smell. And they all
Uh-huh.
smelled the same. It was like a mix of like sandalwood and like dirt and
Yeah.
veggies,
Yeah.
all just like kind of, I don't know, mixed up into one. But anyway,
Yeah, yeah, but it definitely had an mystique, right? Like it
yes.
felt different. It was different. It was more community driven.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, so for Whole Foods, buying a company like Bread and Circus was a big deal, and they kept the branding for a while because it was so unique and so beloved. And then I think they even at some point they try to brand the Whole Foods bread, Bread and Circus like that. They kept like the label or the brand, but then eventually they just swallowed it whole, right? So it's no more. There's no more Bread and Circus. There's none of that branding, none of that feel from that original store. It's gone, and that is true for a lot of the companies they acquired.
It's a bummer.
Okay, so fast forward to this is where it gets interesting.
Ladies, it's time we talk about what happens when the women who keep everything running behind the scenes finally take ownership. You're ready for more control, more impact, but staying where you are won't get you where you want to go, and starting from scratch feels way too risky. So, what if there's a third way? At Our Way, our women's acquisition entrepreneur ecosystem, we help women buy established, cash flowing businesses instead of building from zero. When women take ownership, companies grow stronger and communities thrive. That's just smart economics. Learn more at ourway.com.
April 2017,
Okay.
there's an activist hedge fund by the name of Jana Partners announced that they had acquired 8.3% of Whole Foods stock, right? And because they're public, they can do that. It's I think almost impossible for you to ward off people buying large shares, right? A large amount of shares. They can just do that through the public stock market,
Mhm.
and they weren't subtle about their interest in Whole Foods, or what their initiative was, why they bought such a large share. They wanted the company to sell, and they wanted board seats. They absolutely wanted blood, and you can look this up in the SEC filings from April 2017. You can find this information about their share that they bought.
Mhm.
And John Mackey absolutely fought back. John Mackey is one of the main founders publicly. He even called them greedy bastards, right?
Mhm.
and compared the threat to a sword hanging over his neck. Right? And he wasn't exaggerating. What happens when an activist investors target a mission-driven company, Caitlin? They're not they're not hunting inefficiency. They're hunting vulnerability. And
Mm-hmm.
Jana Partners found it. So in the early 2010s, growth. So they're still buying up. They're still acquiring other companies, right? They're they go IPO, they get some capital, but by the early 2010s, growth had slowed, and competitors, and we've seen the same story with Toys R Us,
Mm-hmm.
competitors like Trader Joe's and Kroger's were undercutting Whole Foods prices, and the brand had lost its premium halo, but it still hadn't figured out how to become accessible either, right? And you remember that whole joke or meme of a whole paycheck?
No,
The
I
whole
don't remember that.
what? Oh, this was like I remember people would say this all the time that Whole Foods was like whole paycheck because it was so expensive. Like you couldn't
Okay.
actually afford to shop there.
Even though it was like this organic, supplier and supermarket, it was incredibly expensive. It was almost like it was like an elitist type grocery store. It became to be.
Yeah, or at least like only situated in the more affluent neighborhoods and urban centers, right? And maybe you'd only go there for certain items, but to buy like your full weeks of groceries at Whole Foods was pretty out of reach for a lot of people,
Pretty
right?
crazy. Yep.
So it felt inaccessible and elitist. So this whole paycheck thing was funny maybe at first, but then it turned to like legit problematic, and they couldn't shake it. So the brand's halo was certainly wearing off, and for more price sensitive or value conscious customers, and like our friend Meg said, she's been shopping at Trader Joe's. She won't go to Whole Foods, right? But I think a lot of people were doing that, or they're supplementing their grocery buying. And the rise of online grocery, discount organic alternatives, and shifting consumer trends about convenience, right? And around convenience meant the Whole Foods traditional model was being squeezed from both ends, from price and convenience, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So people were opting, as you said, you've shopped for groceries online before. I certainly have, unfortunately. So they had both of those squeezes. So it was becoming a tough market, and it was becoming harder and harder for them to find or to chase that margin, right? For the market being a publicly traded company.
Mm-hmm.
This is exactly what activist investors look for. So for Jana, Whole Foods wasn't a failing company. They felt it was a company that, under current conditions, had value but lacked a clear path to realizing it under the existing model. And a sale to a buyer with infrastructure and scale made that value more real.
Mm-hmm.
So Jana comes in, they buy 8.3% of the stock. Mackie he goes nuts. He hates it. He publicly says that they're greedy bastards, right? Pushes back.
Good for
But
him.
2 months later, they sell,
Oh, so he
right?
didn't stand his ground.
Super fast, right? So in June 2017, Whole Foods agreed to be acquired by Amazon for
Okay.
$13.7 billion.
Wow. That's a crazy number. Or at least
Huge
back
number.
then it was a crazy number. Still big.
Huge number.
Yeah.
Huge number that only a few entrants in the market could even offer, right? I mean, that's just like so much money.
But I would think that was Amazon the only option at the time? Because it sounds to me like pressure from the public and just kind of adapting to the changing times of being more efficient as a grocery store, it seemed like the best choice. Or were they the only option?
Good question. So I love that question because it actually does set up like why it moves so fast, or it's one of the reasons why it moves so fast. So let me break that down a little bit. So
Okay.
Janet comes in, she pushes the company to sale. 2 months later, they announce the sale to Amazon. And just like that, the crunchy grocery store that local communities treated and viewed as a trusted, beloved neighbor,
Mhm.
an outlet that supported and provided shelf space for their own, became a node in the world's most powerful surveillance tech logistics empire. And this is what I really want our audience to understand is this is a textbook example of how mission driven companies become vulnerable when we see a few things happen to their company. Their growth slows, certainly what's happening with Whole Foods. Their premium positioning was becoming a liability. That whole paycheck thing wasn't really that much of a joke. The internal complexity outpaces their ability to keep culture and margins. That was certainly true. They went from 12 to over 400 stores. What? Right? Imagine the complexity they adopted, and because they kind of wanted to keep that inherent culture, like in a regional bread and circus, they wanted to try to keep the culture there, or like make it, like preserve some of the elements that made that store great. It added a lot of complexity, right? And that was really hard on their margins and on just operational, efficiencies. And then they became exposed to an activist investor looking for value gaps. So when those four things happen, what I really want our audience to grab from this episode that are thinking about exits or growth, the lesson is absolutely clear. Without carefully aligned capital, investors who value mission, not just margins, your conviction based business can look like a center of value for someone else to extract.
Yeah.
Right. So, in hindsight, it wasn't, as Nathan was saying, it wasn't because they weren't a B Corp. The first thing that they did that really opened them up to vulnerability was going public. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. They lost
Yeah.
control, and they lost like the ethos of the brand and the company. What
Right.
made
By chasing growth.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, exactly. So activist hedge funds like Jana certainly target companies with slowed earnings growth, downward trending same store sales, and decentralized cost structures. And so they can create this narrative that shareholder value is being left on the table, right? And when you're a public company, you can't do that. It's like that gives your fiduciary responsibility, right?
Yeah.
You have to do something, right? So that liability was legit. So that was exactly Whole Foods between 2015 and 2017 for sure. And when Amazon came in like white knight savior, not only with the big number, but it offered their shareholders a 27% premium.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
It's pretty attractive for them.
Super attractive, right? So it was like not only a fair market value, but like a really rich one with good premium. So there's actually a study or analysis from Yale that shows that the board essentially had no choice, right? In an activist takeover, once a premium offer materializes, and Amazon showed up real quick, they refusing it could trigger lawsuits and fiduciary challenges. So the sale moved fast because it had to.
What was what did Amazon sell though to the founders of Whole Foods as like a story or something that would encourage them to feel more comfortable with the sale? Because you would think like, okay, Amazon has the infrastructure, the money, the technology, right? So I would think if they have all these things to make things more efficient, it might lower costs of the food, which has been a huge problem and has been kind of, the downside of the brand to the general public. Was that what they sold to them to get
I would
them?
imagine so. Yeah. I would imagine so. I mean, because the premium was so great, and by declining the offer, it would have legit triggered lawsuits. I don't know how much of that was like a real conversation with the board or with the founders, but I would imagine that was like the value proposition, right? It's like we have free flowing capital, we can ingest into your company, right? We can reduce your overhead, we can increase efficiency, we can bring costs down in XYZ areas.
Mm-hmm. And it sounds like it's a good PR moment, right, for both of the companies. But then you have to understand that, with efficiency and lower costs, somebody has to get affected negatively, whether that's the workers working less hours because of technology or the small local vendors that they have in their stores. I guess those margins would tighten as well.
big firm expertise, values driven impact. At Impact GC, we've traded the traditional law firm playbook for one built on purpose and trust. As a certified B Corp, member of the 1% for the planet, and certified carbon neutral law firm by We Are Neutral, we help mission driven businesses grow, protect their purpose, and lead with confidence. We're here to make the complex simple and the work human. Let's build what matters. Visit impactgclaw.com to learn more.
Yes. So let's get into that. So this was not just a grocery buyout. For Amazon, this was really a way where they could unleash their surveillance and their tech systems that they had now really perfected. So by the time Amazon had arrived, just to recap, Whole Foods had grown from 12 stores to more than 460. It was a strategic data acquisition disguised as a grocery buyout. They were getting immediate access to wealthy, urban, eco-conscious customers, right? With free cash flow. That's hugely attractive. More than 460 prime retail locations and high-valued zip codes, right? So all these stores were placed in good areas, and a beloved brand with built-in trust and purchasing power, right? Amazon Amazon now could leverage Whole Foods' ability to get contracts with different food providers, right? Overnight.
Yeah. Okay.
So to your point, the shareholders celebrated 100%, 20%, 27% premium on their holds. Amazing. The employees and the vendors, not so much, right? So to be clear, Amazon didn't just buy the grocery store; they bought identity. The trust that Whole Foods had built for nearly 40 years was suddenly uploaded. All that data was uploaded into Amazon ecosystem, and they moved quickly. So here's some changes that they made after Amazon acquired Whole Foods in 2017. They began applying, as I said, that same surveillance and data strategies they use across the rest of their empire. You think about Amazon, and they track everything. We know that they track it down to the last detail. So what changed? Well, from a consumer perspective, they started surveilling customer behavior, so purchase tracking. So Amazon connected in-store purchases with online profiles using your Prime accounts, and you've probably seen that if you shopped at Whole Foods. They ask you to connect your Prime account. This let them collect granular data on food preferences, shopping frequency, basket size, even in-store behavior. They put their Echo devices in stores, so
What?
listening devices in the stores. So Amazon has been steadily weaving in more digital data points into their grocery experience, apps, Prime logins, even voice-assisted kiosks in some locations. And they even installed Alexa powered kiosks and listening devices using the premise of assistance or on hands help. And there's been some articles, maybe not proven, that they put these listening devices like in the salad bars. Right?
That doesn't even sound legal, but you know what?
Right? We don't want to get ourselves in trouble here, so we don't know. That's never been proven. Whatever. But all these devices added under the premise of hands-free help or better assistance or better product selection based on what their consumers were demanding. Many critics feared that this was just a Trojan horse for behavioral tracking. Right? They did cashierless tech experiments. So in some stores, they tested the just walk out tech, which required camera heavy setups, right? Tracking every product it's picked up, put back, or purchased, right?
That's
So,
crazy. I even remember, I don't know if you're going to touch on this, but the hand scanning, the palm scanning,
oh,
scanning
yes.
palm, like it's
Yeah, the biometric stuff. Yes,
crazy. I
yes,
remember when I first
yes.
saw that like 10 years ago, I was like blown away. Also kind of creeped out, but that's a story for another time.
Yes, definitely creeped out. I mean, this chase for convenience,
Yeah,
right? So it makes it easier for us. We can just put our handprint. Yes, I mean, I would certainly, yeah, that doesn't end well in most dystopian novels I've ever read. um, but they also did things like price personalization. So they
okay,
even patented systems, Caitlin, that could support individualized pricing. There's no public evidence that they're doing this inside Whole Foods, but the capability is there, and it's definitely part of what is like ongoing. It's what making people nervous about their experience with the stores.
I've heard about this. And like in recent news, I heard that maybe it was Whole Foods. Maybe they were getting, under surveillance or under scrutiny for doing something like this, but there was no way to really prove it.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, I would not be shocked to learn, I'm sure this is true, that if you go on Amazon.com today, your prices could be different from mine
Mhm.
based on our search history, our behavior, our collective. Now they're gaining all these data points, right, in and outside of their systems and combining them.
Wow.
So that's the customer experience, right? A lot more granular surveillance on what is happening inside the stores. For employees, they also adopted a lot of these same strategies. So, time on task monitoring. So, similar to their warehouses where they track everything, and Whole Foods has certainly been in the news for like not allowing people enough time to go to the bathroom, and their warehouses are so huge that they can't physically walk to a bathroom in enough time that they would have allotted. So they're like peeing in bottles amongst the shelves. Like
No.
I'm not making this up. This has been reported. So Whole Foods workers were also tracked for productivity metrics, and tasks were broken down into seconds, and efficiency reports were distributed weekly. So imagine that work environment. Holy hell.
I just can't imagine like a team how they adapt when the culture that they signed up for just like gets replaced overnight. You
Completely.
know, I sympathize with that. This isn't what they signed up for.
Oh no, no. And it's what are they going to do? I mean, finding work is challenging, right?
Hmm.
Um, They also had introduced scorecards and heat maps, so employees were rated based on how well they executed tasks, how quickly they completed them, and how compliant they were with new stocking systems like order to shelf, like their order to shelf inventory model. They used some what has been described as anti-union analytics. So workers and reporters have raised concerns around predictive analytics to identify whether stores and employees were more likely to organize, which of course they would not be supportive of. And they suggested that they monitored social chatter, store sentiment, and even reportedly installed security cameras pointed at break rooms and gathering areas.
So they're under surveillance. It sounds like they're in a prison. It sounds like they're working in a prison.
For real, for real, for real, right? And then that to your point of like what they signed up for, what they maybe liked about their jobs most originally, if they had reduced autonomy. So longtime department leads lost decision making control over things like sourcing and pricing and vendor relationships, right?
Hmm.
And that autonomy gave way to algorithmic that's a hard word to say,
Right.
um, mandates from Seattle. So they would get orders, centralized buying from Seattle replaced their regional autonomy. So those in-store experiences where you'd see more regional products, that was being displaced. So a ton of small local vendors lost shelf space to mass volume SKUs, and the order quantities suddenly ballooned, right? Because they wanted to synthesize and like rationalize a lot of their operational structure.
Hmm.
So they were starting to centralize these orders. The orders were bigger, fewer producers, and they forced a lot of small producers to take on debt to keep up, right? And many just did not survive the transition. So we know if you're making, again, let's go back to like Caitlin, you're the yogurt producer. If you were just selling to your local Whole Foods or your local bread and circus, and your quantities were, let's say, 200 a week, right? And that was really manageable, and that matched up to your cash flow. You'd figured out, you got yourself in a position where you could submit those orders in enough time, because of course you pay out for the product, and then there's a delay on when you get paid for that product, right? Only when it's delivered, but you got to pay for the production, all the stuff that goes on to get that product to market. But now, if Amazon comes back and they say, yeah, we'll still put you on shelves, but now that order quantity has gone up to 5,000 a week because we want you in all of our stores, not just one.
And then you can't
What?
meet that order. And they're like, okay,
No,
you've got a lot of
right?
competition. On to the next that can give us a better
Exactly.
value. Yeah.
Exactly. We'll go on to Jabani, or we'll use our 365 product line.
And is it true too? I've also heard through the grapevine throughout like the last few years that they have actually been more soft on the type of vendors they're using and the ingredients of their products
Mm.
to ensure that they can meet these, uh, you know, meet the shelf life or ensure that they're in stock. So they were being really lenient with what they were allowing in their stores. And a lot of the stuff people were saying wasn't up to the certain caliber of like
Mm.
food that Whole Foods has always promised its customers.
Mm. Mm.
So all of this
I
organic and small and
right.
local, it was kind of getting, what's that called? It was getting like greenwashed in a sense.
Yes. Yes.
And
Yes.
they were just hoping that their consumers wouldn't notice, which was really screwed up.
Yeah, no, I didn't come across that, but I wouldn't be surprised. Speaking with Brenna Davis, the CEO of Organically Grown Company, she was sharing at SOCAP. This is devastating, but I imagine that it's very much true. And I talk a little bit about this with consolidation and market. But she was saying that there are 9 companies that control basically the center aisle of grocery stores.
Mm-hmm.
So these conglomerates. So the whole game in CPG is to make a good product, right? And then to get enough interest in it where you get bought by one of these conglomerates. And what the conglomerates do effectively is they keep the branding, right? Keep the cute story, right, about Caitlin's neighborhood backyard yogurt shop that she made this yogurt for her sick kid when her kid was younger, right? Or maybe her kid has skin issues or something. All the little cute logos or maybe brand certifications, that kind of thing. But then they take that product, strip it, and put in cheaper materials for more margin.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what goes on the shelf. But to the consumer, we think it's the same product. It's not,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah, there's like a blip like on your like CNN.com. You don't notice it. Like you see the branding, everything's the same. But over time, consumers can notice the change. I think this
Yes.
happened with Rayos. It was like a New York owned restaurant that created this like awesome like marinara
Mm,
sauce. They
mm,
got
mm.
into like stores nationwide, and then one of these big conglomerates bought it and slowly started to switch out the ingredients, and the
Yep.
consumers noticed.
Yep. Yep. I don't think that's uncommon. I think that's the name of the game now in
This is
grocery.
all alleged, all allegedly, but
That's
that's what I heard.
right. Yeah.
Really.
Yeah. Excellent. So that was a good, very good. I think that's likely very true. So thinking about how Whole Foods, it wasn't just a restructuring. It was reprogrammed in almost all ways. So that's those same local relationships that rebuilt the store after the 81 flood never survived. Never would have survived this Amazon era that we're in now. So the Whole Foods 2.0 model gutted local autonomy, vendor diversity, and employee perks. A lot of the long-term staff left, to your point, because it just wasn't what they signed up for, or they were laid off. Union efforts are continually crushed, right? And the entire supply chain is now optimized for Amazon logistics, not local resilience or resonance, right?
Mhm.
Every Whole Foods will likely carry dominantly the same products in every single store across the country. They've lost that innovation and uniqueness, and in the process, a company that once stood for values obviously has become a cautionary tale, right?
Mhm.
So after the Amazon acquisition, the Whole Foods became using centralized ordering systems that shifted decision making away from local buyers, and this had real effect on these companies, these local producers and local vendors. Caitlin, one was a kale chip company called Brad's Whole Foods, and they shared how they went from having strong local relationships with Whole Food buyers who championed their products and educated consumers to being delisted entirely after failing to meet their national scale volume expectations. They just could not do it. They couldn't meet the production standards. Or another example is Tonka Bars, which is a Native American owned food company that was rooted in indigenous food systems and was celebrated for its mission and impact. This is like one of the products you would go to a Whole Foods store to get because you couldn't get it at your Albertsons or Kroger or Safeway or what have you. And after the Amazon deal, their products lost their prime shelf placement and were eventually squeezed out altogether by higher margin private label competitors.
Well, that's really screwed up. But I have a question for you, and I don't know if you found this out through your research and looking into this story, but
Mm-hmm.
you know how Amazon has their own brands
Yes.
they sell on their platform. have they introduced or slowly integrated their own
Yes.
organic brands under what looks like private label, trusted, company?
Oh,
But it's really just
well, I don't.
amplifying it.
Shit, I don't know about that. That would be real devious. But they do have their own 365 everyday value line. We've seen that, right?
I have, yeah.
That expanded aggressively, of
Mm,
course. So that started taking up more and more shelf space with cheaper, mass produced alternatives, and smaller producers were just pushed out by the lower prices and the algorithmic efficiency and the relentless pursuit of margin, right? They just could not compete. That was never the game in the first place.
mhm.
So certainly what was once a launch pad for small values aligned companies, I mean, they were an ecosystem on their own, is now a machine that runs on margin and scale, no doubt.
Because
And
typically 365, to your point, and I think that's kind of
mhm,
what I meant, but you don't really stop to think like, oh, this is 365 Whole Foods. It's actually an Amazon brand. It's not marketed that way. But you see it on the shelf, and out of all the other ones, it's typically one of the less expensive options,
yes,
but it still says
yes,
organic and it's Whole Foods, so it must be trusted. So you always go,
yes,
not always, but I would say most times, especially now in this economy, you're trying to find something that's one, healthy, two, isn't going to eat up your wallet.
no, 100%, and no shame in that game, right? People have to do what they have to do, and with salaries not keeping pace with inflation, of course, people are making these decisions every day. But we're
Absolutely.
getting a more and more consolidated ecosystem, which is just not good for the health of our economy.
For too long, selling a company has meant profits for a few and pain for everyone else. It's time for a new model of buying and selling businesses, one built for all stakeholders, on values. Steward Market is that bridge. We're building the marketplace for ethical exits, where founders can sell with confidence, buyers can grow through values-aligned acquisitions, and the ecosystem of funders, CPAs, attorneys, and advisors can collaborate in one transparent hub, connecting every player in the deal-making process around a shared goal, making purpose-driven transactions easier to find, fund, and close. If you believe business transitions can create shared prosperity, not just shareholder value, join us. Sign up for early access at stewardmarket.com and be part of building the next era of impact-driven M&A.
Mhm.
So today, based on Food and Water Watch, this is wild, but today just 4 companies capture nearly 70% of all U.S. grocery sales,
I believe that. I
right?
believe that. Yeah.
And
Very
in
influential.
different parts of the country, that regional retail consolidation might even be greater, right? Where a Walmart or a Dollar General might be the only grocer, only place you can buy fruits and vegetables for miles,
Mhm.
right? Maybe you can't even get fresh fruits and vegetables, right? If it's a dollar store or a Dollar General. So consolidation in the grocery store retail sector directly affects not only consumers, right? Because now they're trapped. There's fewer choices. They have to spend money at these limited locations. They don't have as many choices. But of course, also the workers, farmers, and other producers of these consumer goods.
Mhm.
Everyone's affected by
Yeah.
that consolidation.
Yeah, the people that make up the foundation of this country.
Yes,
Mhm.
yes. So Mackey, John Mackey, our
Mhm.
friend who started Whole Foods, um, he has, since reflected in a couple of different ways. He's been interviewed a few times that, of course, Whole Foods has become very different than what he set out to build, and he isn't sure if he would have taken the same path today. Of course not. Like he's reflective on what happened, and it's just a hard thing that we've seen, over and over. And if we look forward to where we are now, late 2025, Amazon, the last headline I read was Amazon was preparing to cut 30,000 corporate jobs,
Wow.
right?
Mhm.
So even they are, shrinking their labor force. And while simultaneously talking about replacing hundreds of thousands of roles with automation through AI, right? And they have a machine, they have all these data points they can do that with, all the warehousing tech space to do that, data warehousing space, and obviously cash to do that. And the grocery market is oversaturated, but brand loyalty that Whole Foods once really enjoyed is now completely fractured, right?
Mm.
John Mackey, he stepped down in 2022. And I'm sure that's a huge heartbreak for him in a lot of ways. He now runs this wellness startup. Um, but I think, really the biggest story here, which I think is the point of this episode, outside of these things that we've shared that are well, rather horrifying, right? The changes that were made and what happened at these stores, and on a global, on a more national basis, but also regionally, where their supply chain has been just disrupted in these communities. It's that when founders don't have access to aligned capital or to values based buyers, this is the default, right? The default is quarterly profits over people, control over community, and margin over mission.
Mm.
It just is. It's just the nature of how things are stacked against us. But it's certainly, and you and I believe this wholeheartedly, that it doesn't have to be there. There are alternative paths. So my goodness, I mean, I know that Whole Foods got themselves in a situation where they needed capital, so they felt like they had to go IPO. But gosh, man, what if they sold to their employees
Mm-hmm.
and growth was a little bit smaller, but they were able to sell to their employees and double down on what made them great? Or if they had access to impact funds instead. I mean, I think of the environment in 1992. I don't know, Kaylin. I was little, certainly you were littler than me. I don't know what the nature or the environment around impact funds look like, right? Like how available they were to like a Whole Foods to gain capital or to go through some rounds. But certainly for people today, there is a diverse network of impact funds and a lot of funds that are doing some pretty cool work. And certainly we're working to get more people to the buy side that are morally ambitious, that are mission driven, B Corp buyers or profit for purpose buyers, or just even simply, slower, more intentional growth with aligned stakeholders. I mean, going from 12 to 465, dang, right? Like that is like an explosion. That's almost like a chemical reaction. You can't control it once it rolls,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And I think the positive here too is unfortunately like these things have to happen so people can understand like this is what greed and money and people like you said earlier who pry on vulnerable companies and
Yeah.
founders, this is what happens. But now that we have so many resources like the internet and creators and influencers and people just talking about it like you and I on a podcast, but what happens when you go this direction, at least they have the
Open the
resources
doors.
now to make decisions for their company and understand that when when it what does a company lose when it trades its mission for scale, right? And like
Hmm.
what's more important to you. So that's a wild
Yeah.
story, Hannah. That's
It
really
is wild. It is wild. It's heartbreaking in so many ways, but I think also what's clear is that exits are never neutral.
hmm
That someone's values will shape what comes next.
hmm
So certainly advocating and pushing to for you to do anything that you can to make sure that those values are yours, that you care about the same things,
yeah.
right? That you're going to build the same future for your company, or at least if not the same, it's still values aligned, that it's moving in the same direction. If you care about those things, I mean, certainly there are people that just want the highest multiple. They just want the most lucrative exit. They don't care really what happens to their company next. The exit was the point for them, but for a lot of people, it's not. An exit is, like you said, a necessity. It has to happen. So exploring the doors that you have available to you, advocating for more opportunity, for more patient capital, um, exploring those opportunities and pushing for those outcomes really matters, and it matters to everyone, all of us, because we are so interconnected. What happened with Whole Foods matters to me. It matters to you. It matters to our family. It matters to the environment when 5 bags show up with five things in them.
And you have to also think too, everyone's waking up now, and clearly this acquisition didn't crystallize like they thought it would. And just by the sound of it and how things are going, it doesn't seem like a complete flop or failure. But you also have to think about like, why has Amazon been able to like conquer almost every category except grocery? They haven't figured it out. And I think people are catching on to, like, you start to get these big corporations involved. It might be more efficient, but it takes away the soul of and the cork and all the great things that make up a company.
Yeah.
So hopefully
Yeah.
it's changing.
Yeah, I hope that too, because it's coming for us. None of us are immune from those outcomes, and
Mhm.
they're not good. They're not healthy capitalistic outcomes by any means when
Yeah.
there's such consolidation in market. So, well, thanks for listening to me, Caitlin, and walking along with that story. It was fascinating to do the research. I love doing these episodes, and I look forward to doing more.
Yeah, this was fun. Thanks, Hannah. I appreciate it.
So